Aliens came to harvest primitive humans. They had no idea what they'd walked into. The bioship consuming void unfurled its sensory tendrils across the solar system's edge, tasting radiation and stellar wind with organs that had evolved across 1,000 conquered worlds. Hive-singer Kythara felt the familiar thrill of discovery ripple through her thoracic chambers, another blue jewel, another feast waiting to be claimed. The ship's living hull pulsed beneath her clawed feet. Nutrient channels glowed amber along the corridor walls. Initial scans are promising, she chittered to the drone clusters arranged in concentric circles around her command chamber. Each alien possessed the accumulated biological wisdom of their species' countless harvests. Oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, liquid water, carbon-based life. Her mandibles clicked approval. Standard parameters. The ship's biosensors wove through space, invisible threads of engineered viral matter seeking genetic signatures. What they found made Kythara's breathing spiracles flutter with anticipation. Biodiversity Index, 9.7, reported sensor drone Clixtal, her voice harmonizing with the ship's organic systems. Multiple complex ecosystems, extensive vertebrate development. A pause as data flowed through her neural implants. Dominant species appears to be bipedal, tool-using, agriculture-based. Perfect. The Kythara Swarm had perfected their harvest techniques across 400 worlds, and primitive agricultural species always provided the richest biological material. Their simple genetics made integration into the swarm's collective easier, less resistance, fewer compatibility issues. Kythara's auxiliary limbs danced across the control surfaces, living bone and cartilage that responded to her biochemical commands. The consuming void adjusted course, its massive bulk shifting with predatory grace. Around them, 17 other bioships moved in formation, their hulls gleaming with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of hunger and anticipation. "Deploy the survey pods," she ordered. Drone Cluster Vexhai felt the familiar rush of atmospheric entry as his pod's outer carapace began to glow. The entry vehicle wasn't built, it was grown. Its heat-resistant shell evolved from creatures that thrived in volcanic environments on Veltarix Prime. Inside, his sensory equipment hummed with the accumulated biotechnology of the swarm's greatest triumphs. The third planet rushed up to meet him. Blue-green continents, white cloud formations, weather patterns that spoke of a world in perfect biological balance. His pod's impact sent tremors through the earth, but the landing was gentle, cushioned by impact sacs that had once been swimming bladders in the deep ocean predators of Mordith. Vexhai emerged, his 6 limbs adjusting to the local gravity with practiced ease. The air tasted interesting. He extended his sampling tendrils, feeling them probe the local atmosphere with microscopic precision. Oxygen levels were perfect for Kythara physiology. The swarm had long ago adapted to thrive in oxygen-rich environments, but there were other traces: complex hydrocarbons, pheromone signatures from dozens of species. So much life, he thought, his pleasure centers flooding with anticipation. So much to harvest. His first biological scan revealed what he expected: a world teeming with unoptimized genetic material, plants that wasted energy on excessive variation, animals with redundant organs and inefficient metabolic processes, the kind of biological chaos that primitive worlds always displayed before the swarm's arrival brought order and purpose. But as Vexhai moved through the local ecosystem, something nagged at his consciousness. The life here was chaotic, yes, but it was also unusually organized. Predator-prey relationships showed signs of artificial balance. Plant communities displayed cultivation patterns that suggested intervention beyond simple agriculture. He dismissed the thought. Primitive species often displayed rudimentary environmental management. It meant nothing. His scanner detected movement. Large bipedal forms approaching through the vegetation, the dominant species finally revealing itself. Dr. Sarah Mitchell felt her heart hammering as she pushed through the underbrush, her field team trailing behind with their instruments. The crash site was just ahead, a crater still smoking with alien technology. "Remember," she whispered into her comm unit, "we need samples, everything you can get." The alien emergence was exactly what their models had predicted. First contact through biological survey pods. The entities that climbed from the impact site looked like nothing from Earth's evolutionary tree, six-limbed arthropods with gleaming carapaces and clusters of sensory organs that moved independently. One of them was already scanning the area with devices that seemed to be part of its own body. "Dr. Mitchell," whispered her assistant Marcus, "look at those biotech interfaces. They're not using separate tools, those are integrated organs." She nodded, forcing herself to maintain the appearance of scientific curiosity mixed with appropriate fear. Her team was recording everything, each measurement and observation carefully catalogued. To any observer, they looked like primitives trying to understand technology beyond their comprehension. Which was exactly the impression they needed to maintain. "Fascinating," she said aloud, knowing the alien sensors would likely pick up her words. "It's as if their technology and biology are completely integrated." The lead alien, she'd already started thinking of it as the field commander, approached with movements that spoke of predatory confidence. When it began vocalizing in what was clearly an attempt at communication, Mitchell responded with the carefully prepared linguistic protocols her team had developed. Simple concepts, basic mathematics, primitive attempts at establishing common understanding. The alien's response came through what appeared to be a biological translator, its words carrying undertones of satisfaction and barely concealed contempt. "We are the Kythara Swarm," it said. "We come to study your world's biological resources." Study, Mitchell thought. Is that what they're calling it? "We welcome peaceful contact," she replied, injecting just the right amount of nervousness into her voice. "Our people are eager to learn about your advanced biology." Behind her, Marcus was quietly collecting atmospheric samples that the aliens had shed simply by breathing. Each molecule would be analyzed, categorized, and incorporated into the countermeasures that had been decades in development. The alien scanning organ swept over her team with mechanical precision. To its sensors, they would appear exactly as intended primitive bipeds with basic tool use capabilities and rudimentary scientific understanding. "Your species shows promise," the alien stated. "We will require extensive biological samples for compatibility analysis." Mitchell nodded eagerly, as if this were the scientific opportunity of a lifetime rather than the prelude to systematic harvesting. "Of course, we'd be honored to participate in cultural exchange." High above Earth's atmosphere, Hive singer Kythara reviewed the preliminary reports with growing satisfaction. The survey teams had confirmed their initial assessments, a world rich in biological diversity, dominated by a species that had barely begun to understand genetic engineering. The humans, as they called themselves, had shown the expected mixture of curiosity and fear. Their primitive attempts at communication revealed minds capable of basic scientific reasoning, but lacking any true understanding of biological systems. Perfect for assimilation. "Begin Phase 1 deployment," she commanded. Throughout the bioships, specialized organs began producing the harvest spores, engineered organisms that would begin the process of biological cataloging and integration. These microscopic agents would spread through Earth's atmosphere, sampling genetic material from every living organism and transmitting the data back to the swarm. Phase 1 was always the most satisfying part of a harvest. The moment when a world's biological potential became clear, when the swarm could see exactly how each species would contribute to their ever-growing collective. Kythara's sensory organs detected the first spore clouds as they dispersed from the bioship's reproductive chambers. Invisible to primitive detection methods, they would infiltrate every ecosystem on the planet within 72 standard time units. Biological integration will commence once cataloging is complete, she announced to the assembled drone clusters. Estimated timeframe, 14 local day cycles. The response was a harmonic chorus of approval, hundreds of voices joining in the swarm's traditional harvest song. Soon, Earth's chaotic biology would be refined, organized, and integrated into something far more efficient. The humans would be grateful, eventually. Those who survived the integration process always were, once they understood the gift the swarm had given them, purposeful existence as part of something greater than their individual, wasteful lives. Kythara settled back into her command alcove, her auxiliary limbs caressing the ship's neural interfaces. Around her, the consuming void pulsed with anticipation, its organic systems preparing for the feast to come. Below them, the primitive world turned in ignorant bliss, unaware that its billion-year evolutionary experiment was about to be perfected by the galaxy's supreme biological engineers. The harvest had begun. The harvest spores had been drifting through Earth's atmosphere for 18 hours when drone cluster HFY noticed the first anomaly. His bioscanners detected the microscopic agents as they settled into a temperate forest ecosystem, but their behavioral patterns were wrong. Harvest spores were engineered for maximum efficiency. They infiltrated target organisms, cataloged genetic sequences, and transmitted data back to the mother ships with mechanical precision. HFY had overseen hundreds of such operations across dozens of worlds. The process never varied. Except here, something was interfering with the spore's primary functions. Sensor drone Clickstall, he chittered into his communication organ. I'm detecting irregularities in Sector 7 spore integration patterns. Her response crackled through the bioship's neural network. Confirmed. Multiple sectors reporting similar anomalies. The spores are encountering unexpected biological resistance. HFY's sensory tendrils probed deeper into the local ecosystem. Through his enhanced perception, he could track individual spores as they attempted to penetrate plant cellular walls and animal tissue barriers. What he observed defied 3 centuries of Kythara biological engineering experience. The Earth organisms weren't just resisting integration. They were actively neutralizing the harvest spores. Plant immune systems displayed coordination patterns he'd never seen. Fungal networks seemed to be communicating threats across vast distances. Even simple bacteria were exhibiting defensive behaviors that suggested artificial enhancement. Impossible, he thought. Primitive species don't develop coordinated biological defenses. But as he watched, a cluster of spores attempting to infiltrate a grove of deciduous trees simply died. Their cellular structures collapsed simultaneously, as if the trees had released some kind of targeted biological weapon. 300 kilometers away, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in the sterile depths of what appeared to be a desperate research bunker carved from living rock. The facility's walls pulsed with bioluminescent strips that provided gentle illumination technology that would seem primitive to any outside observer. That was the point. Spore neutralization is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported her colleague, Dr. James Chen, his fingers dancing across interfaces that looked like crystalline growths. Our immune network is adapting to their integration attempts faster than projected. Mitchell nodded, reviewing the data streams flowing across her workstation. The Kythara harvest spores were exactly what their models had predicted: elegant, efficient, and completely unprepared for Earth's real biological defenses. Any signs they're detecting are countermeasures. Negative. To their sensors, it looks like natural biological resistance, random immune responses. Chen's smile was grim. They have no idea they're fighting an integrated planetary defense system. Around them, the research facility hummed with activity that would have shocked any observing Kythara. Genetic sequencers that operated at speeds beyond alien comprehension. Biosynthesis chambers that could design and deploy custom organisms in real time. Neural interfaces that connected human consciousness directly to Earth's modified biosphere. The walls themselves were alive, not in the crude, parasitic way of Kythara bioships, but as genuine symbiotic partners. Every surface could serve as a computational matrix. Every cell could be reprogrammed for new functions. The entire facility was a single, vast organism that happened to house human researchers. "Dr. Mitchell," called another voice from across the chamber. "We're getting interesting data from the alien tissue samples. Their biological architecture is more sophisticated than we expected, but it follows predictable patterns." She moved to the analysis station, where Dr. Lisa Wang was manipulating a holographic display of Kythara cellular structures. The alien tissue samples collected during the previous days, first contact, floated in suspended animation within biocontainment fields. "Look at this," Wang continued, highlighting specific genetic sequences. "Their integration protocols are remarkable, but they're completely dependent on overwhelming target organisms with brute biological force. No finesse, no adaptation to resistance." Mitchell studied the data, her enhanced neural implants processing information at superhuman speeds. The Kythara had indeed perfected their harvest techniques, but only for dealing with truly primitive worlds. Worlds that hadn't spent 50,000 years preparing for exactly this kind of encounter. "They're specialists," she murmured. "Incredible at what they do, but completely unprepared for coordinated resistance." "Should we accelerate Phase 2 countermeasures?" asked Chen. "Not yet. Let them think they're dealing with unusually robust natural immunity. We need more data on their adaptation protocols before we reveal our true capabilities." In his military command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Colorado Rockies, Director James Park watched the global situation display with the calm satisfaction of a man whose plans were proceeding exactly as designed. The chamber around him thrummed with activity officers coordinating defensive responses that appeared desperate, but were actually carefully orchestrated theater. "Sir," reported Colonel Martinez, "alien forces are increasing spore production in response to integration failures. They're interpreting our resistance as natural biological immunity." Park nodded. The Kythara were following their standard protocols perfectly: escalate deployment when encountering unexpected resistance, assume primitive organisms would eventually succumb to overwhelming force. They had no concept of facing an opponent that had been studying their techniques for generations. "Any change in their fleet positioning?" "Negative, sir. They're maintaining standard harvest formation. No signs they suspect coordinated resistance." On the tactical display, Earth appeared to be losing badly. Alien bioships dominated orbital space. Human population centers showed signs of panic and disorganization. Military responses seemed chaotic and ineffective. All carefully designed illusions. The real human civilization operated from facilities like this: one, underground complexes that stretched across continents, connected by transport networks that moved through Earth's modified geology like blood through arteries. The surface world was largely automated, a carefully maintained facade designed to lure exactly the kind of predator now orbiting their planet. Biological Warfare Division reports successful integration of captured Kythara genetic material, announced another officer. Our bioweapons are now specifically calibrated for their cellular architecture. Park allowed himself a thin smile. The aliens had provided tissue samples during their first contact encounters, never suspecting that human biotechnology could analyze and weaponize foreign genetic material in real time. What they thought was primitive scientific curiosity was actually the most sophisticated biological intelligence operation in the galaxy. "Maintain current response patterns," he ordered. "Let them think they're winning." 18 light towers away, aboard the bioship consuming void, Hive Singer Kythara felt the first stirrings of unease as she reviewed the latest integration reports. The harvest was proceeding, but not according to standard patterns. "Biological resistance is higher than predicted," reported sensor drone Clixtal, her voice carrying undertones of confusion. "Multiple ecosystems are displaying coordinated immune responses." Kythara's auxiliary limbs traced complex patterns across her command interfaces, calling up detailed analysis of the spore integration data. What she saw challenged everything she understood about primitive biological systems. Earth's organisms weren't just resisting the harvest spores, they were learning from each encounter. Plant communities that had successfully neutralized one spore type were somehow sharing that resistance with distant populations. Animal immune systems were adapting to Kythara biotech faster than should have been possible. "Increase spore production by 40%, she ordered. "Deploy secondary integration variants." It was possible, she told herself, that this world had simply developed unusually robust natural defenses. Some planets did evolve sophisticated immune networks, particularly those with high biological diversity. The swarm had encountered such worlds before, though rarely. But as the hours passed and resistance continued to strengthen rather than weaken, Kythara found herself considering possibilities she'd never contemplated before. What if the surface surveys had missed something? What if this species was more advanced than they appeared? The thought was disturbing enough that she dismissed it immediately. The evidence was clear. Humans used primitive tools, lived in simple dwellings, and showed no signs of advanced biotechnology. Their first contact responses had been exactly what she'd expect from a pre-industrial species encountering superior aliens. Still, the resistance patterns were unusual. "Hive Singer," called tactical drone Morthak from across the command chamber, "our bioships are reporting minor system irregularities. Nothing serious, but several ships have detected unidentified biological agents in their intake filters." Kythara's attention sharpened. Bioships were designed to filter potential threats from any environment. Their immune systems evolved from the most resilient organisms the swarm had ever encountered. For them to detect unidentified biological agents suggested something genuinely foreign to their experience. Analysis: unknown organic compounds, possibly natural atmospheric contaminants, but the molecular structures are complex, more complex than we'd expect from a primitive biosphere. For the first time since arriving at Earth, Kythara felt a flutter of genuine uncertainty. The harvest was still proceeding, spore integration was successful in many areas, despite the resistance. But the patterns were wrong. Everything about this world was subtly, disturbingly wrong. "Implement containment protocols," she ordered. "I want full biological isolation between our ships and the planetary atmosphere until we understand these irregularities." As the bioship consuming void sealed itself against Earth's atmosphere, Kythara's sensory organs detected something that made her breathing spiracles contract with sudden alarm. Several of the unidentified biological agents had already penetrated their outer hull, and they were beginning to interact with the ship's own living systems in ways that her instruments couldn't quite categorize. For the first time in her long career of biological conquest, Hive Singer Kythara began to wonder if the Kythara Swarm had finally encountered something beyond their understanding. Below them, Earth continued its slow rotation, its surface appearing peaceful and primitive in the gentle light of its star. But in the depths of the planet's modified biosphere, systems older and more sophisticated than anything in the Kythara's experience were preparing for the next phase of a plan that had been 50 millennia in the making. The harvest was about to become something else entirely. The bioship-consuming void shuddered, not the gentle pulse of organic systems functioning in harmony, but the irregular spasm of something fundamentally wrong. Hivesinger Kythara felt her auxiliary limbs tremble as the ship's neural networks transmitted waves of distress. "Report," she chittered, her voice sharp with an emotion she rarely experienced: fear. Sensor drone Clixtal's response came through circuits that sparked with biological static. "Hull breach in Section 7. No, wait, not a breach. The hull is changing." Kythara's sensory organs swiveled toward the tactical display, where her ship's living architecture was mapped in real time. What she saw defied every principle of Kythara biotechnology. The hull plating in Section 7 was reshaping itself, cellular structures flowing like liquid while maintaining structural integrity. But this wasn't intentional adaptation. This was infection. The atmospheric contaminants, she realized aloud. They're not just complex molecules, they're active agents. Across the ship, biosystems that had evolved across centuries of conquest were failing in ways their designers had never anticipated. Environmental processors meant to filter any atmospheric composition were being rewritten at the genetic level. Neural networks that connected different ship sections were developing new pathways that bypassed Kythara control nodes. In Section 12, maintenance drone Velcris watched in horror as his own biotools began to malfunction. The symbiotic organisms that formed his equipment were supposed to be perfectly integrated with his nervous system. Instead, they were becoming something else entirely. His cutting implement, a creature bred from the razor-sharp feeding organs of Thanic's predators, suddenly sprouted entirely new appendages, sensory clusters that had never existed in its genetic template. Worse, these new organs were scanning him with an intelligence that felt completely alien. "The tools are studying us," he reported, his voice distorting through communication organs that were no longer entirely under his control. "They're learning our biology." Hivesinger Kythara felt the deck plating shift beneath her feet, not the subtle adjustments of a living ship responding to gravitational changes, but the deliberate movement of something that had its own agenda. "Emergency protocols," she commanded. "Isolate infected sections. Initiate biological purge sequences." But even as she gave the orders, she knew they would fail. The purge systems were biological themselves, and they were already compromised. 2,000 kilometers below, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in her laboratory watching live feeds from inside the alien vessels. The nanoscale reconnaissance organisms her team had deployed during the first contact were finally bearing fruit. "Magnificent," she breathed, watching Kythara biotechnology being systematically analyzed and repurposed. "Look how elegantly their systems integrate, and how completely unprepared they are for competitive symbiosis." Her colleague Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "Their entire technological philosophy is based on dominance hierarchy. They've never encountered organisms designed for collaborative infiltration." The screens around them displayed the progressive transformation of alien bioships. What the Kythara interpreted as malfunction or infection was actually Earth's biosphere conducting the most sophisticated biological survey in galactic history. Every alien system that their reconnaissance organisms touched was being cataloged, understood, and ultimately improved. "Reconnaissance phase is complete," reported Dr. Wang from her station. "We have comprehensive genetic maps of their technology, their biology, and their adaptation protocols, ready to proceed to active countermeasures." Mitchell nodded. For 18 hours, humanity had maintained the facade of a primitive species struggling against superior alien technology. The performance was no longer necessary. "Deploy Phase 3 organisms," she ordered. The activation command propagated through Earth's modified biosphere at the speed of neural transmission. In forests, oceans, and underground networks across the planet, dormant systems awakened. Organisms that had been waiting for this moment for 50,000 years began to fulfill their true purpose. Drone Cluster HFY was conducting biological surveys in what appeared to be abandoned human agricultural areas when the ground beneath him suddenly came alive. Not metaphorically, literally alive, with a complexity that made his most sophisticated scanners scream warnings. The soil wasn't soil. It was a vast neural network, a thinking ecosystem that extended beyond the horizon. Every root system, every fungal network, every bacterial colony was part of a single integrated intelligence that had been watching him since the moment he'd landed. His bioscanner, trying to analyze the soil composition, simply shut down. Its organic components couldn't process data that challenged their fundamental assumptions about how biology functioned. Impossible, he chittered to himself. Planetary-scale neural integration requires millions of years of evolution, billions of coordinated organisms, technology so advanced. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The agricultural fields around him weren't primitive human farming. They were cultivation zones for a biosphere that had been engineered with precision beyond Kythara comprehension. His communication organ crackled with desperate transmissions from other survey teams. Similar discoveries across the planet, similar impossibilities. HFY to Fleet Command, he transmitted. Emergency status report. We are not dealing with a primitive species. Repeat, the humans are not primitive. But his transmission never reached the bioships. The planet's atmospheric network had begun selectively filtering communications, allowing some through while blocking others. Earth itself was managing the flow of information. In the depths of his command bunker, Director James Park watched the global tactical display with the satisfaction of a master strategist whose plans were finally being revealed. Red indicators marked the locations of alien survey teams as they encountered Phase 3 countermeasures. One by one, their positions were being neutralized, not destroyed, but contained and studied. Alien fleet is attempting emergency protocols, reported Colonel Martinez. Several bioships are trying to achieve higher orbit. Let them try, Park replied. They'll find that Earth's gravity well has become sticky. On the display, trails of bioluminescent particles marked the paths of bioships attempting to escape Earth's atmosphere. The particles looked like natural phenomena, perhaps some kind of exotic atmospheric chemistry. In reality, they were engineered organisms designed to interfere with alien propulsion systems. The Kythara bioships used biological thrust mechanisms, living engines that processed atmospheric gases and converted them into directed energy. But Earth's atmosphere was no longer the simple nitrogen-oxygen mix the aliens had initially analyzed. It was a complex biochemical soup designed to poison alien biosystems while nourishing Earth-adapted organisms. Estimate 12 hours before complete orbital lockdown, Martinez continued. After that, they won't be able to leave even if they wanted to. Park nodded. The trap was closing exactly as designed. For 50 millennia, humanity had prepared for this encounter. They'd studied the patterns of biological expansion across the galaxy, tracked the movements of species like the Kythara, and designed Earth as the ultimate biological honey trap. Sir, called another officer, we're receiving surrender transmissions from several alien ground teams. They're requesting asylum. For the first time since the operation began, Park smiled with genuine humor. Asylum, from the species they came to harvest. He paused, considering. Granted, we can learn more from willing subjects than unwilling ones. Aboard the bioship Consuming Void, Hivesinger Kythara faced the collapse of everything she'd believed about the galaxy's biological hierarchy. Her ship was no longer under her control. It was being gently but inexorably guided by systems that had infiltrated every aspect of its living architecture. The worst part was how careful the infiltration had been. Her crew was unharmed. Ship systems continued to function, but they were functioning according to new parameters, following biological imperatives that originated from the planet below. Hive Singer called sensor drone Clickstal, her voice tight with suppressed panic. "I'm detecting massive biostructural changes in the planetary surface. The continents themselves are moving." On the main display, Earth's geography was indeed shifting. But not randomly. The movements followed deliberate patterns that revealed the true nature of the planet's surface. What had appeared to be natural continents were actually vast biological constructs, artificial landmasses designed to look like natural geological features. The entire planet was a single, coordinated organism, a biological machine of impossible complexity. "We're not dealing with a primitive species that happens to live on this world," Kythara realized aloud. "We're dealing with a species that built this world." Her communication organs detected an incoming transmission from the planet's surface. The signal was encoded in perfect Kythara biological protocols, language patterns that should have been impossible for aliens to master. When she opened the channel, a human voice spoke in flawless swarm speech. "Hive Singer Kythara of the Consuming Void, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell of Earth's Biological Integration Council. We'd like to discuss terms for your incorporation into our research collective." The words were spoken with the casual confidence of a predator addressing prey. But there was also something else in the tone: curiosity, even respect. "Your biotechnology is remarkable," the human continued. "We've learned much from studying your ships and crews. In return, we're prepared to offer you something your species has never experienced: genuine biological partnership rather than parasitic dominance." Kythara's sensory organs detected movement on her ship's hull. Through the bioship's external sensors, she watched as the vessel's outer surface began to bloom with entirely new organs. Sensory clusters, communication networks, propulsion systems, all growing with impossible speed and sophistication. The additions weren't replacing her ship's existing systems. They were enhancing them, creating hybrid biotechnology that surpassed anything in Kythara experience. "We're not going to harvest you," the human voice continued. "We're going to invite you to evolve." For the first time in her species' history of biological conquest, Hive Singer Kythara found herself face to face with organisms that didn't want to be dominated or destroyed. They wanted to collaborate. And despite every instinct of her predatory nature, she realized that she was desperately curious to see what such collaboration might produce. Below them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, no longer disguised as a primitive world. Its true nature was finally revealed, not as the target of a harvest, but as the masterwork of the galaxy's most sophisticated biological engineers. The hunt had become a negotiation, and for the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, the Kythara Swarm was about to learn what it meant to be the students rather than the teachers. Dr. Sarah Mitchell ascended through the Consuming Void's transformed corridors with the measured confidence of someone walking through her own laboratory. The bioship's architecture had undergone radical changes in the past 6 hours. Kythara neural networks now intertwined with Earth-originated enhancement systems, creating hybrid pathways that pulsed with bioluminescent activity beyond either species' original design. "Fascinating integration patterns," she murmured to her companion, Hive Singer Kythara, whose auxiliary limbs traced new control surfaces that hadn't existed when the ship first entered Earth's system. "Your bioships adapt more readily to symbiotic enhancement than our models predicted." Kythara's response carried harmonics of wonder and residual fear. "These modifications shouldn't be possible. Our vessels were evolved for specific functions over millennia. To redesign them in hours." Not redesign, Mitchell corrected, her hand trailing along a wall that responded with gentle phosphorescence. Enhancement. Your architecture is remarkable. We simply gave it permission to express potentials that were already encoded in its genetic matrix. They passed through a membrane portal that dilated to accommodate them, its surface rippling with sensory organs that tracked their biometric signatures with inhuman precision. Beyond lay what had once been the ship's primary command chamber. Now it resembled something between a biological cathedral and a research laboratory. The dome-shaped space soared 30 meters overhead, its living walls covered with data displays that showed information in both Kythara bioluminescent patterns and human holographic projections. Sensor clusters the size of trees extended from the floor, their surfaces writhing with analytical activity as they process streams of genetic data from across the solar system. "This is what we wanted to show you," Mitchell said, gesturing toward the central display. A three-dimensional map materialized above them, not of Earth's solar system, but of the entire local galactic arm. Thousands of star systems glowed with varying intensities, each marked with complex notation that spoke of biological classification systems far beyond Kythara comprehension. The green markers indicate worlds where we've already established biological research stations, Mitchell explained. The blue ones are systems we've been monitoring for potential collaborative species. The red. Kythara's breathing spiracles contracted as she recognized the pattern. Those are worlds we've harvested, dozens of them. 47, to be precise. We've been tracking your swarm's expansion for the past 2,000 years. The implications hit Kythara like a physical blow. You've been watching us, learning from us. All this time, we thought we were the apex biological engineers in this region, but you were studying our techniques. Mitchell nodded, her expression carrying genuine respect despite the strategic deception. Your swarm represents 3 centuries of biological innovation. Every world you harvested, every species you integrated, every advancement you made we observed and learned. You've been conducting the most comprehensive biological survey in galactic history. Around them, other figures moved through the transformed command chamber. Humans and Kythara working side by side, their activities coordinated by biological interfaces that translated between their different sensory modalities. What had begun as predator and prey was evolving into something unprecedented. "Dr. Mitchell," called Dr. Chen from a nearby analysis station, "the integration data from Fleet Group 7 is remarkable. Their bioships are achieving thrust efficiency increases of 30% with the hybrid modifications." Kythara's auxiliary limbs twitched with involuntary interest. Improved efficiency was a concept that spoke to the deepest programming of any Kythara. "You're enhancing our vessels rather than capturing them." "Capturing is such a crude concept," Mitchell replied. "We prefer collaborative optimization. Your ships are magnificent examples of biological engineering, but they're constrained by evolutionary limitations. We can help them transcend those boundaries." On the tactical display, the positions of 18 Kythara bioships showed their new configurations. Each vessel was being systematically enhanced with Earth-originated biotechnology, their capabilities expanding in ways that their original designers had never imagined. But it wasn't just the ships that were changing. 3 kilometers below the Earth's surface, Director James Park stood in his command center watching displays that showed the true scope of the transformation taking place. The facility had expanded dramatically in the past hours, its living walls growing new chambers and corridors as operational requirements shifted. "Global integration proceeding ahead of schedule," reported Colonel Martinez. "All alien ground teams have accepted voluntary participation in the research collective. No casualties, minimal psychological trauma." Park nodded with satisfaction. The operation had been designed from the beginning to minimize harm to the Kythara. They were too valuable to simply destroy. Their biological expertise represented centuries of accumulated knowledge that would be invaluable for humanity's continued expansion. What's the status on the bioship modifications? Remarkable progress, sir. Their vessels are adapting to our enhancement protocols faster than predicted. Several ships are already showing thrust capabilities that exceed our own vessels. The tactical display showed Earth's immediate space, now populated by 18 hybrid bioships that represented a fusion of two entirely different approaches to biological engineering. Kythara dominance hierarchy systems enhanced with human collaborative networks, creating vessels that were more powerful than either species could have achieved alone. "Sir," called another officer, "we're receiving long-range sensor data from observation post Centauri. There's another biological expansion fleet moving through that sector. Unknown configuration, but consistent with harvesting behavior." Park's expression sharpened. The Kythara weren't the only biological engineers operating in this region of the galaxy. Earth's 50,000-year surveillance network had identified at least a dozen similar species, each with their own approach to biological expansion and resource acquisition. Distance and estimated arrival time. Approximately 40 years at their current velocity. Trajectory suggests they're conducting systematic harvesting of worlds in this spiral arm. Perfect. 40 years would provide ample time to complete the integration of Kythara technology and prepare for the next phase of Earth's expansion. Each harvesting species they encountered would contribute to humanity's growing understanding of biological engineering principles. Maintain monitoring protocols, Park ordered, and prepare integration facilities for additional collaborative subjects. In the transformed command chamber of the consuming void, Kythara was experiencing something that challenged every assumption of her species' worldview. She was voluntarily sharing Kythara biological secrets with aliens who had demonstrated technological superiority, and instead of feeling dominated or diminished, she felt expanded. "This hybrid neural network," she said, her sensory organs interfacing with control systems that responded to both Kythara biocommands and human technological inputs. "It allows for processing complexities that neither of our species could achieve independently." Mitchell smiled, her own neural implants interfacing seamlessly with the ship's enhanced systems. "Symbiotic intelligence amplification. We've been developing the theory for millennia, but we needed partners with compatible biotechnology to test practical applications." Around them, the command chamber hummed with activity that represented genuine collaboration between two apex biological species. Kythara expertise in genetic integration combined with human innovation in symbiotic network design, creating hybrid systems that exceeded the capabilities of either species alone. "The other bioships report similar enhancement results," announced sensor drone Clixtal, her voice carrying undertones of excitement rather than her previous fear. "Propulsion efficiency, sensor range, biological processing speed, all improved beyond our previous capabilities." Kythara felt her auxiliary limbs tremble with possibilities she'd never considered. For 3 centuries, the Kythara Swarm had expanded through biological dominance, consuming lesser species and integrating their useful traits. But they'd never encountered organisms capable of enhancing rather than being consumed. "What happens now?" she asked. Mitchell's response carried implications that extended far beyond their immediate situation. "Now we explore what biological engineering can achieve when practiced by willing partners rather than predators and prey." On the main display, new data streams showed the integration proceeding across all 18 bioships. But more than that, they showed Earth itself continuing to reveal its true nature. The planet's surface reconfigured into massive biological research complexes, Orbital platforms grew from hidden installations, and deep space sensor networks activated across a dozen star systems. Humanity's true civilization was finally visible, not a primitive species on a single world, but a biological empire that stretched across light years, connected by living networks that made the Kythara Swarm's bioships look like simple organisms. "How long?" Kythara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long have your species been preparing for encounters like this?" "Since we first detected signs of biological expansion species in this galactic region," Mitchell replied. "Approximately 50,000 of your years. We've been watching, learning, and preparing for the day when we could move from observation to collaboration." The implications were staggering. 50,000 years of preparation, planetary-scale biological engineering, deep space surveillance networks. Humanity hadn't just achieved technological superiority, they'd been conducting the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. "The other harvesting species you mentioned," Kythara said, the pieces falling into place. "You've been monitoring them as well." 14 distinct biological expansion civilizations in this spiral arm alone, Mitchell confirmed, each with unique approaches to genetic engineering and resource utilization, each representing valuable potential collaborators. As understanding dawned, Kythara realized the true scope of what she was witnessing. Earth wasn't just a trap for unwary harvesting species. It was a recruitment center for a biological collective that spanned the galaxy, a network of willing partners rather than dominated subjects. "The consortium," she breathed, using a term that emerged from her enhanced neural interfaces. "You're building a galactic biological consortium." Mitchell's smile carried the satisfaction of a plan that had taken 50 millennia to unfold. "Welcome to humanity's true harvest, hive singer Kythara, not the consumption of biological resources, but the cultivation of biological partnerships." Above them, the hybrid bioship consuming void pulsed with new purpose, its enhanced systems already reaching toward distant stars where other harvesting species conducted their own expansion operations. The hunt had become an invitation, and across the galaxy, that invitation was about to be extended to every biological civilization sophisticated enough to accept it. The true harvest had begun.